Welcome to another Hand Drink Solo Wine info video where we review curious wines for curious minds. And today's curious wine is the Org de Rac Roussanne, which is a certified organic white wine from the Swartland made with fruit grown in the foothills of the Piketberg. Now, Org de Rac as a farm is not in any particular Swartland wine ward. In fact, they're not particularly close to any Swartland wine action, really. And they're certainly not trying to stay on any Swartland trends. But every now and then they pop their heads up, win an award, and then kind of disappear again. The case in point would be last year when they entered a Merlot and they had their Merlot finish in the top 10 South African Merlots. Yes, a Swartland Merlot. And it really was quite delicious. And this Roussanne is just another case in point, which was the highest scoring Roussanne in the entire WineMag.co.za minority report. To understand Roussanne in South Africa, think of it as a little bit like football goals scored by Erling Haaland. They are beautiful when you see them, but no one is holding their breath for a sudden oversupply. There are only about 80 hectares in the entire South African wineland, so even when they are excellent, which many of them are, it's never going to make major headlines. What is interesting to note about the 8 or 10 Roussannes that we've tasted this year is that there are two very distinct camps. There is the early pick, citrus-led, lower alcohol, sometimes quite dry textured wine. And then there is the super blousy, extroverted, almost overwhelming ripe peach fruit, florals and marzipan type element. Not unlike a big Viognier, although perhaps not quite as gregarious as Viognier. Pleasantly, Org de Rac Roussanne manages to walk a tightrope right down the middle, and we are all the more joyful for it. It's ripe enough to show some really well-defined fruit, but it's also fresh enough to keep you reaching for the glass. But don't take my word for it. Get into the glass and taste it yourself. Now, when we give this guy a sniff, well, I mean, it really is spectacular. I can't help but feel like I wish it had got a few more points in the recent minority report because it just has so many layers on the aromas. You've got this amazing stone fruit, but not overly sweet. It's just this delicate kind of peaches and nectarine going on. Then there's lemon bonbon candy and this beautiful herbal honey bush element in there as well. And if that wasn't enough, it's like there's touches of frangipani and marzipan. It's like a late autumn picnic where you have Aunt Gertrude who's gently peeling a tangerine, your Nana is sipping on some rooibos, and Uncle Brian is gently doing acid. Now, when we give it a sip, well, again, I said that this wine walks a tightrope, and even on the palate, that is so true because right up front, you've got a touch of that honeybush sweetness in the herbal element that expresses itself in peach fruit on the palate. But then around the edges of the sweeter peach fruit is a lovely, juicy kind of lime cordial note, almost like you might find in a cool climate Chardonnay. Those fruit elements are wrapped in a lovely kind of waxy, pithy texture on the palate, really, and that is one of the characteristics of Roussanne, perhaps not quite as much as is the case with a cultivar like Claret Blanche, but definitely a beautiful waxy hint to it, and an almost kind of retro aromatic citrus element, like someone has zested some citrus rind over a fresh bar of nougat. For the wine sleuths who love to look at the alcohol and make deductions about the wine, you'd think that 13.5% is towards the top end of the range for white wines from South Africa at least, but really it tastes even lighter and fresher than that number suggests. And as I said earlier, this beautiful balance between well-formed fruit and freshness is exactly why it was my top scoring Roussanne in the competition. Now, if you're trying to benchmark Roussanne as a cultivar, which is, I guess, it's a French grape, right? And so you'd want to benchmark it against the old world. But for the most part in France, Roussanne is a blending cultivar, often blended with Marsanne, especially up in the northern Rhone, but it also gets around a lot in the southern Rhone, and you can find single cultivar bottlings, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those should be the benchmark just because they are from its country of origin. So really what I do is benchmark this wine against South African Roussanne, because the South African winemakers who have committed to work with this cultivar are not too concerned about what's happening in other parts of the world, but are really trying to make the best Roussannes they can in their particular climate. And that's what makes South African Roussanne so incredibly exciting. It is a law unto itself. But that all might sound a little vague, and so I am going to give you one name that you have to engage with if you're interested in Roussanne, and that is winemaker Elisma Visser and the Olifantsberg brand. She has taken Roussanne and kind of made it her own. She has a single cultivar Roussanne. She has a Roussanne-led white blend called the Matriarch under the Olifantsberg label. And really, I think she is one of the masters with this cultivar, making wines from fruit grown in this sort of elevated vineyards of the Breede Kloof. And then if you're more interested in Roussanne globally, I've left a link to another video which talks more about the cultivar on a global scale.